live.
Okay, great. We can come back together. Would you like to resume and then introduce Jennifer?
I would. So we talked at our last board meeting about having the desire to have a strategic plan, something that follows us and sort of projects us into the future of where it is we want to be, and the goals that we want to set. We also spoke briefly about having a succession plan when it comes to our superintendent retiring when she does, and what that will look like. And it to my way of thinking, it's really important, and it will help us when we are looking for a person to be the next superintendent. If we have some goals and we have something that we have been working toward, so that another superintendent doesn't join us and feel as though they're starting from scratch, but that they're coming into a machine that is well-oiled and in an organization that's been well cared for and well tended. There are some districts, and one close by that's had 5 superintendents in 4 years, and we certainly do not want to become anything like that. And if you were to go backwards in the last 20 years, I've been on the board for 24. If you were to go back 20 years and look at the progress that we have made in the last 12, and again, we can track some of that. And about 11 years ago, we did a strategic plan, and we did not shelve it. However, it was the traditional sticky dots and paper, and that's what was used 12 years ago. But this format is something that can live and breathe and grow with us in its use of artificial intelligence and technology. We will be able to have something that actually has voice inflection, because we'll be recording voices, and it won't be like reading text where you can't infer, but you'll actually hear what's happening and hear the responses of people, and perhaps even type in a word like MSAD11, and every time it gets used, it'll come up and it will reflect those voices. So it's really going to be an important tool for us to moving forward in our work currently, but I think also as we move forward heading into the future for MSAD11, where is it we want to be, and how well prepared are we now, and how well prepared do we want to be moving forward? So Pat was fortunate enough to meet Jennifer Chase. Jennifer has works with, or is Maine Education 2050. She has partners, and she has agreed to work with us if we would like for her to. And so she's here tonight because we wanted more information as a board before we decided how much money we were going to spend. And the amount of money is different than what was presented at the board meeting, and it's less than what we had spoken about. And so we wanted more information, which is why we're here tonight. And unfortunately, some of the board members that wanted this missed especially aren't able to be with us tonight. So at the end of this, we won't, of course, be able to vote, but we'll be able to do a thumbs up, thumbs down. And out of this will come, I will copy this recording in an email and ask the board members who are not here to come prepared to vote, because we'll do our thumbs up, thumbs down here, not go back over it in its entirety in the board meeting, but please come prepared to vote, because we need to keep moving forward so that we can get this work going. Does that make sense? Okay, Pat, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think the only thing that I would add is kind of back to the succession plan that you really do need to look at. You want to make sure that you attract someone who has your vision, who believes in the direction that you're moving in. So it's not just to position you, it's to help guide you in hiring a replacement. I think that's really, really important. And I think it could be a great resource, a great tool for you. So no, but I would be really excited to introduce Jennifer. And Jennifer has someone else with her today. via Zoom, and that's Alex, Kelly, Berman. I really appreciate both of you coming. They have agreed to be here to help answer some questions that were raised at the last meeting, as Becky said. So I'd like to just turn it over and let them do the bulk of the conversation and do a presentation, so that you have better understanding of exactly what this would look like and how it could really benefit our community. And then I know that Jennifer at the end is going to talk a little bit about the funding.
Yeah. So thanks for inviting me to come and speak with you about the project tonight. So I am Jennifer Chase. I'm the Executive Director of Education Action Forum of Maine. I'm also lucky enough to be a doctoral student at USN in public policy and ed leadership. And I just started working with Amy Johnson there and MEPRI and doing some research with her on CTE and things like that. So it's a little bit about and I'm from Freeport. So just down the lane, so to speak. I also have a background as an educator and as a school leader. So I have a little bit of perspective. I haven't been a school board member myself, but I've worked with school boards quite a bit. And then I also wanted to introduce Alex. Alex, you could introduce yourself.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Alex Kelly Berman, Vice President of Partnerships and Programs at Qualitative, which you'll hear a little bit about in a moment. We've been working very closely with Jennifer and are super excited about all of this very new school work and all that we're learning from it. I will say that I'm from Maine, born and raised in Bangor. And if this meeting were next week, I could have actually been in attendance in person because I'm visiting my parents who still live in Bangor next week for a week, which I'm really excited about. So happy to be there in spirit and really excited to tell you a little bit more about Qualitative and hear your questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex. All right, so I was thinking that I would first do a slide presentation, and along the way, feel free to just ask questions along the way, and I'll leave some pauses. And then after that, we'll get to a little bit more specifics from Alex about Qualitative and the technology, and then we can just have open questions after that. Does that sound useful? All right, great.
Thanks.
So let's see if I can share my screen successfully here. All right, we'll go with that. So this is just to say I am here from Ed Forum, and we have these three projects right here on the slide, but Maine Education 2050 is the center, and that really is our biggest project this year. Pat alluded to this a couple of minutes ago, and it's really a statewide project to learn what youth will need from their education to thrive personally, civically, and economically in the coming decades. So 2050 is a very far way away. And so some people have said to us, why 2050? Why aren't we saying 2030? Because it takes time, right? It takes time. And so we have economic development goals for 2030 or 2029 from the state. And we can align with those for sure, but we also need to be looking out further than that even. So some of the partners that we have on Maine Education 2050 are Educate Maine. So there are I would say, Educate Maine and Education Action Forum. We started this project together back in the fall of 2021. And then we brought Maine Resilience Building Network on board as well. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with Maine Resilience Building Network here, but they're a wonderful training with them. Oh, fantastic. Yeah, so we really feel that by bringing them in, we've rounded out the project to come at this from a few different perspectives. And you can see there's some other collaborating organizations on here with us too. So what's the big picture? And actually, just to pause for a moment and say, I created these slides so that you can take them. I will send them to Pat and you will have pretty much everything I've said on here. So no worries about if you're not able to see it from where oh, you should be able to see it. Okay. So it's a statewide project to bring together communities and youth and educators and business and industry to design the education system here for the Maine that we want to see, instead of them ending up with a Maine that we get with a system that we haven't thought about the design for. So industries are also participating because we do need to know from industries what kinds of skills and capacities are needed for people to thrive in those industries we want to have here in Maine. All of the conversations are recorded, as Pat talked about, and all of that information is available publicly. And so Alex will talk a little bit more about the technology, but we haven't designed it in such a way that we are collecting it and owning the data. The data belongs to the people who participate in the project. And so in that way, it's accessible to you, to someone else, to anyone really who wants to learn from it. And we're hoping that people do access it for sure. And then also coming out of this data will be white papers and reports and things starting to be shared publicly in winter of 2023. We had our first conversation back at the Educate Maine Symposium in December. And so then we piloted after that for a few months, and then we began in the spring more formally. So individual districts can and are participating at various levels. Some places are just having 2 or 3 conversations, and some like yours are, I think, using a lot of foresight and seeing how it could be useful for you in strategic planning. And that idea actually first was suggested to me from Eileen King at the Maine School. Yeah, everyone knows Eileen King. So she said, this could be really useful. Would you come and speak to superintendents and let them know it's available? So that's kind of how we got a little bit further down the road with the idea of working with individual districts and going a little bit deeper. Because as a part of the Maine Education 2050 project, we're not providing analysis for individual districts. We're doing county-wide reports. So we're saying in the county of Kennebec, in the county of Cumberland, here are the things that we've learned, trends and things like that. And that information will be available to everybody. And we'll email it directly to superintendents and school board chairs. But that is not individual analysis for schools and districts. It's big picture. It's how does this group fit into the state? Pat, do you have a question?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you're probably wondering, okay, you're recording these conversations, but what is that like? What does it mean to be in a conversation? So the first thing is we provide all the Zoom links. People just click the link that we send them and they join a group of 3 to 5 other people. So these are small. They're definitely small enough that everybody has a chance to speak fully in the 90 minutes or so that the conversations take, between 75 and 90. We will make them 75 if that's what people need. Generally, people in the conversations want 90. After we get everybody in the room, we ask people to introduce themselves with just their first names. So this is really important to the project, and that is everyone's voice needs to be heard and contributing here and listened to, and it's not about your position in the community or the business that you own or those things. What you bring is your experiences and your knowledge, and what you bring to the conversation is what's important. And also, we encourage people to use a pseudonym if they would prefer that. And I have to say, many students use a name of their own choosing, just so that they can kind of stay a little bit more anonymous. Then we ask for permission to record the conversation. Everybody, and we actually go through a whole statement about that and discussing where the data is owned and stored and all of those kinds of things. People then give their consent. And then the host, and that's the people who we've trained to run the conversations, the host then facilitates the conversation based on a set of questions similar to, if not identical to, the ones that I've shared with you there. And those questions we got from, and Alex maybe doesn't need to speak to this exactly, but Portico has a group of conversation questions that they use as a prototype for all sorts of community conversations. They do these all over the country. We took those and then made them specific to Maine Education 2050. And we did that with a group of different stakeholders from different kinds of nonprofit organizations and the DOE and even students. And so we took those, excuse me. And then I went to a group called Knowledge Works. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Knowledge Works, but they're an education organization that works with schools and counties and districts all over the country. And they have actually a Department of Strategic Foresight. And their Department of Strategic Foresight has a man named Jason Swanson who works for them. And I know Jason had worked with them on other projects, and he gave insight and feedback on these particular questions. And they're really created with an arc in mind to bring people from, I don't know who these other people are in the room with me right now in the Zoom room, or I might even know them, but I'm not sure I've ever had a conversation with them like this before, to really starting to deepen their thinking about the topics and to kind of sink in and relax a little bit and to connect to each other and to what they really think and feel, instead of starting with positions on issues. You know, if someone just says to me, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? Well, I can give you an answer right now, but it might not be really considered. It might not really be the deeper answer. It might just give you a surface understanding of what I think about something. And so the conversations are really organized and designed in a way to allow people over the course of the conversation to come to some really important points that they may want to make and share. And so also just to say, there's an arc, and those questions are on there where I say they're designed, these are the questions will be similar to these questions. The facilitators have a lot of room to say, I heard this person answer this question in a way that leads me to ask them another question. To say, can you say more about this when you mentioned that? Or I might hear that while I've asked a question, no one's answered it because they really want to talk about this. Okay, we're going to learn a little bit about this because it's coming up and that needs to be acknowledged. So we go there, and then I might ask that next question in maybe a different way, or maybe I don't ask it at all because we've gotten to it through another question. And so those are suggestions. And there's also a lot of I would say not a lot, there's some couching of those. And so we don't just say, and now the next question is, we say, well, so pause for a moment and think about what's been said so far, or, imagine what might be in 10 years in your community. And I give people time to think about that. And then we ask the next question. So then, so people respond, they share their thoughts and their experiences. And we really do try to ask for examples and stories, and people at the very beginning aren't sure how to do that usually, but actually they get the hang of it very quickly. And so then we get more into hearing their personal stories and examples from their experiences. At the very end, actually our last question, as you saw there, I'll just say it for the people who are watching from home. The last question is always, what one or two things do you really want policymakers to hear? And so they've had this very full conversation, an hour and a half or hour and 20 minutes in, we say, what's the one thing you really want people to hear? And it's interesting to hear. Sometimes it's actually nothing that they've yet said. And that's really important to know. And sometimes it's to go back and make a point that they had spoken about earlier. So it's very easy to do the process. We just pick some dates, and Pat and I talked about some different ways that might happen. We choose people to participate. People use this link, and we can train people to do this as opposed to us in a short training. And so we'll go into that in the overview of the costs. That's fine. We upload the conversation afterwards directly to the Local Voices Network platform. And that's the part that Alex is going to talk about. And then we go through and we code and we analyze and we interpret the data across all of these conversations in Maine. And then for your project, across all of your conversations here at MSAD11. And at the bottom here, you see where I said districts can involve stakeholders in the sense-making process. We can talk a little bit more about that in the fee schedule, but we have built in a process where all the people who have participated in conversations can then come to a second session if they want to, and really look at the data that's been generated and try to kind of do a first level sense making. What does this really mean to you? What does it mean to me? That's one thing, and I can give you the outsider's perspective. But also, what does it mean to the people who have already participated in the conversations? That's another level of community engagement. People who go through that process are really owning the data for sure. And I'll say one more thing about that. We do this process also with schools, just with the students. We actually have gone through this process in a way that allows the students to really help prioritize the gleanings, because there is a lot we'll learn, right? But how to prioritize those, we've seen that it's very meaningful to go through that process. Any questions at this point before I go on? I think that's come up right away. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned this is over a long period of time. So do you, after a year or so, do it again? Or
That's a great question. Do you mean for Gardner or for Maine Education 2050?
Well, you said you combine districts for the information you get?
So for the 2050 project, which is the statewide project that we combine the data from all of every county. We have conversations in every county very specifically. And so we look at it all together, but we also look at it by county. And then we also look at it by all the educators in the state, and then all the community members in the state, all the youth in the state, to see where the patterns are across counties also. So in the big picture, we're looking for trends in Maine. Like, what are the real trends in Maine that we can build a common understanding of among many different stakeholders in Maine? And we have the key organizations are statewide, nonprofits, philanthropy, Eileen King and Steve Bailey and people like that, that's that one level. But for Gardner, we would look at the conversations that are just here, like this group of 240 voices. What did these people have to say? And again, then we also look, and I can show you an example of a template table of contents for a report that we could write. But basically, we pull out, what did the educators say? What did the youth say? What did the parents say? What did the community members say? But then we also look at, what did they all say about this? What did they all say about that? What did they all say about this? And so by going vertically and horizontally, we're really able to get at where's the nexus of what are the most important themes and topics to the people here? And also, what are the hot button topics that we might not even know about, that they are surfaced in there. So this project is just a few months. This project here in Gardner is a few months. Maine Education 2050 will end, hopefully, our first series of conversations in January of 2023. And so we'll have spent almost a year having conversations. And then we do have a plan 3 years from now to do another series of conversations. So for you, for the whole state, for you, maybe that's 5 to 8 years. You have another series of conversations and you look at the data that we provided to you from this time, and you can compare and say, where are we tracking? Have we changed a whole lot? Have we not changed a whole lot? Have we met some of the themes that came up? Or you could, who knows, 5 to 8 years from now, maybe you decide to do something different, but the data is still there for you to use. It's available. Does that answer the question? Okay, great. Anybody else?
I just wanted to, hey, thanks so much. Check on, you said sort of like that, once the data is presented, it'll be accessed in some format. How is that going to be? Like it goes to the local voices sort of cloud, is that it?
Exactly.
And then we can sign in, community members can sign in.
Exactly. So it does, and Alex can say more about the details of this,
Okay.
but the idea is it goes to the local voices network platform.
Okay, yeah.
And then you can create an account. Everybody who participates is invited to go in and look at it and actually also highlight and make comments basically to say, this, don't forget about this. Anybody can do that, whether they come, anyone who's participated, even if they don't come to like an extra sense making session or something like that. But then anyone in the public can go on and look at and listen to. They just can't make highlights and comments and things like that unless they've been invited to create an account.
Okay, so it's wide open. Certain people will have edit access.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, not as much edit, but they can annotate.
There we
More
go.
like annotating,
Nice.
yeah. Editing would be dangerous.
I was broad with that, yes. Thank you.
And then, another way to think about this is just to throw it out there. It would be really fantastic and wonderful if Gardner wanted to contribute all of this learning to the statewide project. And we have worked with schools that don't want to do that, and it's internal to you. We can do it that way too. I mean, that's a slightly different outcome, meaning, but if that's something that the board really wants to discuss and is concerned with, then that's something that we could discuss. All right, so I just thought, what are some ideas here for why this would be a good idea for MSAD11? There's public comment, right? People can come to the school board meeting, there's public comment, but this is public comment. This is an opportunity for people to really share in depth their thoughts and their feelings about things and remain somewhat anonymous. They're speaking in a group of people, so they aren't faceless, but it isn't putting yourself out there in front of the camera. This does allow a lot more voices to be lifted up. You all really have the opportunity to invite some people who haven't previously been invited to participate to the table and to really get at the heart of what's important to them. And then also this opportunity to create a common vision. Like we're imagining, Educate Maine and Maine Resilience Building Network and Action Forum Maine are imagining creating this common vision in Maine that we can kind of design our system towards and collaborate towards, no matter who is elected governor or who is the DOE commissioner. That's what that project is about. But you all can do that here in your district too. And then this data is a resource for the future. It's interesting that the Maine State Library said that they were interested in housing all of this data from all across the state in their archives so that it could be accessed for many years to come. Which
When I made me think of Bendable, if you haven't heard of that
Yes,
project, this would be
yes.
great for that
Totally.
launch next week.
Yeah. Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. So any other questions before I go into showing a little bit of what it might look like for you once you dive in?
And
Yeah,
just
fine.
one other thing on confidentiality or, that kind of thing. It sounds like, yeah, using the pseudonym as an option. Any, like, what's happening with the data later? Is that going to get accessed by a third party or,
Yeah. Great question. I will let Alex
Oh,
answer that.
okay, great.
No, it's safe, and I'll let her answer that.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer that right now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the data it can be gated in different ways. So like Jennifer mentioned, it can be made totally public on one side of the spectrum, which would give the general public access to any of your conversations or your archive, your collection of conversations. And then, on the other side of the spectrum, you can make it completely private. And you can think about making individual conversations public or available even to a subset of people who you invite to be users on the platform as part of your collection. You can do that also with highlights too, I should mention. So a highlight is like an excerpt from a conversation. Maybe there are bits and pieces from your conversation that you're really excited to share out more broadly in different ways. And so you have that ability as well. But the only other party that would have access to your content if it was made private is our very small dedicated Cortico team of 10 people. And we all have a deep understanding of the importance of privacy and access and all of that. So that's it. Even though it's on the Local Voices Network platform, you control who has access to it and who gets added as a user.
They've done a nice job too of making it very user friendly. So it's not like, oh, I have to know how to use Python or something to get in there. You really can just log in and choose and invite people by email addresses. And it's very user friendly. I'm just going to go quickly through just a couple of images here because I think Alex will go into this more deeply. But here's basically a vision of what you would see on this main page. First, there's actually a map of Maine where it shows all the conversations that happened. But then pretty quickly it goes down and it shows you what are the main topics that are being talked about across all these different conversations. And then within those topics, you can click on one and say, well, I want to know more about what's happening in education, which is on the right, and inclusivity, which is on the left. What are the words, keywords that are coming up? Or mental health and government. You can kind of see here are these top words that are being used or themes within these topics. And you can then go into that even further and say, well, what I really want to know about is COVID, for example, within mental health or something. And so you can keep drilling down further and further, and you can get to the level of conversation. So this is a single conversation here. You can see the people's names on the left. And then across, if you follow someone's name horizontally, you see the moments at which they spoke. Those little blocks are the moments at which they spoke. And the words on the top are just a selection of frequently used words that are meaningful, that align with some of these key themes. You can click on one of those on the platform and it will show you exactly where those words were used in that conversation. And then the really neat thing is then you can say, okay, I want to listen to what Emmanuel said about teachers, for example. Well, this is Lindsay. In any case, you can then go right here and you can you can view the individual highlight there or the text where the words were spoken, but then you can also listen to it. I'm going to give you the opportunity to listen to a few excerpts in just a second, maybe like 2 more slides. But you can also then search for a very specific word. And I have kind of a funny story about searching for very specific words. So in one school we worked with, we had, maybe we had 90 students or something who had participated in the conversations. And I had not facilitated them myself. I had trained the students to facilitate the conversations. And they had actually designed the conversation protocols. So they came up with the questions that they were going to be asking with our guidance, of course. So they had the conversations, and then I was the only adult listening to all the conversations. So I had listened to all of them, and I knew quite a bit about what was important to them, but I still felt like there was something missing that I couldn't really put my finger on. So I searched for the word nothing. And by searching for the word nothing, I was able to surface all the times they said, and nothing's being done about it. So I could find out, well, what are they saying nothing is being done about? You know, what's the concern? So it's a, you know, yet nothing might not come up as a keyword, right? So it's a balance between what the AI can provide and what humans think about. How can I get down to the nugget of what's important, what's going on right now? So you can be beyond the AI analysis. Here's another little highlight here. You can tag conversation highlights with important themes and topics that we know would come up, and we can talk about beforehand. What are things you want us to pull out besides the horizontal and vertical that I already spoke about? Are there things you want us to really look for? We can tag by that and then sort and analyze using those codes. So here are just a few excerpts for you to listen to. So here's one, and these are all from conversations that happened this summer. And generally it will say at the bottom, do you see where it says from Lincoln County Community Conversation, and it has the date? That's what it looks like. People can search on the platform by date, by conversation, by type. Oh, I probably have to unmute. Let's see.
And what the needs are, because they're going to change, and then people are going to need time.
I'm sorry. I guess I don't think that's going to work.
Maybe if you can cancel your microphone, is that an option there, or is that too? Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
well,
Would there be any way that your friend from afar could play it?
yeah, Alex, I don't know if you can you actually go to these highlights?
Yeah, if you want to send me the slide deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I can pull them up that way.
Oh, she's so cool.
I know.
That's right. It's like,
Thank you for that solve. So just, I think that someone maybe asked a little while ago, talking about, you know, the listening to these and the meaning behind them. It is really pretty neat to be able to hear people voice these in their own words. And so the report that we provide, everything we say, every assertion we make is linked to multiple quotes. So you'll never hear us say, and this is what people said, without backing up. The citations are all your community's statements. And so, you know, someone might say, well, when is Pat going to retire? And that can be, when's Pat going to retire? Or, oh, when's Pat going to retire? And so, right, you want to know, you want to hear the nuance. And so we hear the nuance, but you can also hear the nuance in that. And so one of the benefits of that is that there's much more credibility. There's just much more credibility, because there's nothing that's going to come out in a report that you're going to share that isn't grounded in what you've heard. And so there's a nice level of transparency there. Alex, how's it working on your end?
It's good, but I need you to actually stop sharing your screen so that I can share my screen. Yeah. So I'm going to do that. Here are the highlights. All right. So I don't know if you want to tee this up at all.
Okay. No, you can just play that first one.
Okay, cool. Actually, you know what? Okay, here, share computer sound. Okay.
Question. I think that the school system needs to find a way to adapt to the people in the community and what the needs are, because they're going to change, and then the people are going to change, and the tides are going to change on what's happening in the world. And I think it's important for the systems around it to meet the people, instead of trying to make the people change to meet the system. I think of.
And you can see on there was a tag, hashtag and it had a long code. That's a predetermined code that we're using for Maine Education 2050. So every time someone talks about something like that, we can go back and find it later. Right, that was the essential schools. Go ahead, yeah, we can listen to this one too.
I'm sorry, Larissa, I'm gonna say it again, but like nothing about us without us, right? Like get a bunch of people at the table to talk about what they hope to see for the future, what they would like to change. I think would be valuable.
Is there one more, Alex?
There is, yeah, if we want to hear it. I think that there were even a couple more, but I wasn't sure how many.
I think we do one or two more. I think there was one that was about students in particular.
Yep, I will bring that up. Oops, wrong thing, 1 second. We go.
It's also okay because I'm going to share the slide deck with Pat, and Pat can share it, and you can listen to all these highlights yourself by clicking on the link.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
So I don't feel like I really need to go back to screen sharing. I was just going to have a final slide after that, just to say that there's this way of drilling down and down and down, deeper and deeper into that, but then coming back up and bringing in the kind of reality by listening to the person's actual voice. And those are really exciting to share with your community also. So to say, pick things out and say, what are the things we really want to highlight for the public to know that we learned? So that's kind of an interesting way of doing it. I think at this point, it would be great to have Alex, you sharing about the Cortico aspect of it.
Great, happy to. And I think that Jennifer has teed us up very well, actually. There are a lot of threads and everything that you just shared that you'll hear a little bit more about connected to what we do at Cortico too. I will say, unfortunately, I have a 7:05 hard stop because I have a toddler who needs to be put to bed tonight. So I'm going to give you the brief version and then would love to just make sure I have time to answer any of your questions. I think I can stretch to 7:10. We'll see if I hear him in the background. So pulling up the deck. So Cortico is a nonprofit. We started in 2018 in cooperation with MIT Center for Constructive Communication, which from now on, I'm just going to call C3 for short. We are basically their deployment arm. So they develop tools and processes that have never really been implemented before with community partners. And, they're all dedicated to the pursuit of improving the way that we communicate in the public sphere. So no small task. So we introduce these tools and processes in different ways with partners around the country and most recently around the world. Actually, we just had our first local partner. And we do this by bringing human listening and machine learning together. So sometimes when you hear MIT, you think a lot of really cool technology. And yes, we have all of that, but all of the technology that we introduce is supported by human listening. Our mission as a nonprofit is to use the processes and tools that we introduce to bring underheard community voices specifically to the center of a healthier public dialogue. I think that we can all agree that there are a lot of different ways that either we've implemented or we've heard about in communities to improve community input processes. Some of this is done, in town hall forums or through surveys or focus groups or one-on-one interviews. But whatever it is, it oftentimes falls short of really inviting people to share from personal experiences. And if that's done, it sometimes goes unrecorded. So it's tough to kind of completely invite people from your community to share from their personal experiences and let them know their voices will be heard when we don't really have the tools, to support that kind of sharing and listening. I think I heard someone earlier talk about the kind of quintessential Post-it notes, stickers, big sheets of paper. This is exactly what we're working to solve for is ways that we can make the sharing of personal experiences more enduring and give them the best chance of creating real impact in communities. So how do we do this? I'm just going to kind of really speed through these slides because Jennifer shared a bunch about how this work is really coming to life through Maine 2050. But it all starts with a small group conversation, inviting people in small groups, not in big forums, to share from personal experiences, coming up with the questions that are going to invite that. I personally come from an oral history background, so I really bring that influence to this work, open-ended questions that invite open sharing. After those conversations are recorded, keyword recorded, lots of community conversations programs happening that are unrecorded, and they have their own power. But what we do is record these small group conversations and then upload them to the Local Voices Network platform, which I can share with you in a moment. And also, perhaps we can provide a link to Maine 2050 so you can browse and see what it's like for yourself. But on LVN, these conversations are put through our system, which engineers can describe in a much more eloquent way than I can. But basically what happens is there is an artificial intelligence component that elevates topics and subtopics. And that happens in a matter of 1 to 2 days. Each conversation has a full-length transcript, and then you can see across conversations what types of topics and themes are coming up. You can create highlights, you can share in new ways, and that kind of brings me to the third piece of our process, which doesn't just stop on LVN, but continues with the work that you are all doing in threading what you're hearing through these conversations to be able to share it in your communities. So partners have done this in many different ways. You can see all the way on the left, a glimpse of a new conversation portal that we're developing for partner work to be able to, kind of tip the idea of the report on its head. Sometimes when you collect a lot of qualitative data, specifically people's, stories, it's tempting to just type up a PDF, a report, put it in a PDF, send it around, but it collects dust. So the portal, as we call it, really tips that on its head, invites people to listen to stories throughout, and shares a more personal narrative of what's being heard. Another example that I'll just kind of briefly share is this one on the end with the city of Cambridge. I think that I heard the topic of leadership selection be mentioned in this group. And we actually worked recently with the city of Cambridge on a city manager search process. This was a highly controversial search process. A lot of eyes in the community were on this. And so the city of Cambridge recorded 20 conversations, small group conversations, uploaded them to LVN, and then threaded what they heard, the themes and direct quotes through the actual job description for the city manager as a way of proving we're listening and here's what we're doing with what we're hearing. So all of this together, we start out with a small group conversations that are recorded, put through a process that involves human and AI analysis, and continues on to reach the actual ears of decision makers, policymakers, people in communities who have decisions to make. And all of this creates a scalable transparency that makes it very clear that listening is happening and that people's words aren't just collecting dust and they're being valued. We've introduced this similar model across 65 partnerships, 38 states, 10,000 voices, as the slide would suggest, and we're done a lot of recent work in schools, largely due to connecting with Jennifer. It's been absolutely amazing, but also work across sectors. We've worked with government agencies, largely on hiring decisions like the city manager selection process I mentioned, policy decisions. We're actually currently working with the city of Chicago on a large citywide strategic planning process, which has been amazing. We work with a lot of nonprofits and community coalitions as they set their strategic plans. So recent global example that I hinted at was with Junior Achievement Worldwide. They work with students around the world on financial and entrepreneurial programs. And for the first time ever, they were including youth voices in their strategic planning process. We supported them in that. And we built a public portal, which I'll flash on your screen to share all of what came out of those conversations. And then we work with newsrooms. So as you know, there's just a deep distrust in communities about journalism and local media. And so we are working with a lot of newsrooms to rebuild that trust, to connect journalists more closely with their communities by hosting small group conversations and actually using the stories that they record in their reporting. And I'm just going to finish up this quote with this quote from Becky Foley. I'm sure that Jennifer shared this with you, but in our recent work with schools, one of the really exciting things that we're seeing, beginning with the work that we did at Freeport High School, is just an opportunity to use LVN and all of the connected processes to increase student engagement, to make sure that students feel like they have a voice in an otherwise very elusive process, whether that's setting strategy, choosing the next superintendent, even assessing a program that's happening already within one single school. It's all a super valuable way to make sure that students know that their voice is valued. So with that, I'm just going to kind of briefly do a screen share of my husband just texted me asking me if I was going to be done soon. I feel like you got a really good taste of the platform from Jennifer, and I am just going to stretch my time on the Zoom for the next couple of minutes to see if any questions are coming up. So I'll stop sharing there. And Jennifer, I feel like if you want to share LVN, you'd be very well equipped to do that as well.
Any questions for Alex?
How many school districts in this state are interested or have taken part?
Oh, I would have to get back to you to make sure that I give you an accurate number. How many? There are 3 working with us at this deeper level. Because there are many school districts participating on having like 3 or 6 or 9 conversations or something like that. So I would need to get back to you, but I can give Pat that number. And actually, we could also find it right up by looking at the platform. I would just need to do that.
But this would be the only district doing it
For strategic planning.
for strategic planning,
Right.
yeah.
And you all definitely are at the leading edge of really looking at using this as deeply and productively as you imagined. But we have these 2 other ones working with us on a school level as opposed to a district level.
I will mention also that we're working with a couple of other schools outside of Maine as well. Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system is working with us on a strategic planning process. And then Winston-Salem schools also, we're about to begin work with them. And then potential project in Newark, New Jersey as well at a high school in the area that is connected to strategic planning. So.
I just had this might be more than we can get into right now, but sort of how does the AI assess the qualitative responses here, and how is that different from what people can do? Right? Like, say we just got the data, not with the AI, not with this, and like assessed it. How is that going to be different then?
Yeah, so there's another tool actually that Jennifer has started using called the Insights tool that will take highlights that you've created as human beings doing the listening work and identifying the moments that are connected to the themes that you're hoping to learn more about. All of those highlights are fed into that tool, and you can create your own code book, which essentially means just a list of themes that you want to use to categorize the highlights. The code book, it would be very difficult for a like a computer to create it in many cases, just because it's so much based on what you're hoping to learn. And also just, doing kind of the more bottom-up listening to the conversations. You never know what you're going to collect, what type of sentiment you're going to be able to kind of read into from the way that people are speaking. So we actually work with a lot of our partners to build that code book based on their local knowledge, based on their interest in the conversations. What the computer does is there's just, kind of a top level topic creation and keywords. So it's a bit of a different, I wouldn't even call it sense making, it's analysis. It's like, a little bit of a different top level analysis, but it supports in your sense making because it's very much driven by the excerpts that are coming up around the topics too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alex, one way I think about it, and it might be completely off, is it like a word cloud generator?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the more something is said, the more it rises up to a higher level topic, and so like in a word cloud, that just gets to be a bigger word. But on this, it looks like you can then actually dig into that and say it's teacher or it's, I don't even know, literacy. Then it'll track it down to the actual conversation, so you can get to the qualitative piece rather than just the fact that that was said a lot. Is it a more sophisticated version of that?
Yep, exactly. And sophisticated too, in the sense that you can find interaction between topics. So if I wanted to see moments when housing and education intersected in the conversations that I collected, I could isolate moments where that intersection happened. So you can see that just in the, oh yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And if you actually, Jennifer, if you want to go back to the main ed homepage and scroll down to the topics. Yeah, there, yep. If you just want to click into higher education, and you can scroll down. So this is kind of what this deeper look looks like. You can unselect, deselect keywords as well. And then if you click on related topics underneath the keywords box, you can find that intersection. So say if you want to see intersection between higher ed and economy, you can see kind of color coded within excerpts and introduce a bit more of a discovery there for yourself as you're seeing what comes up.
So doing this as humans would take us for a very long time to go through 240 people's conversations.
Yep.
But this creates a level of efficiency so we can get to the deeper work quicker.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And some partners, I should say, stop at this level of analysis, and they're using LVN as general proof of listening and opening for the community to do the listening with them, and it's not as important for them to do that deeper level human-led sense making work. So it just depends on how much time you have and where you're hoping to kind of introduce and take the data beyond the platform.
It's like indexing, but way smarter.
Yeah. And hopefully way more engaging too. Like one of the things throughout the platform is just like threading, the voice of the people throughout. So you can do that listening as well.
Really interesting too is you can also search just by speaker. So you can say, I know that Pat said something really interesting about, and I can't remember, I'm just gonna listen to all the places where Pat said something in this conversation and then sort through that. Or where did Pat talk about this topic? It's very, I have to say it's very intuitive. So it allows you to explore and kind of go on hunches and find out if you're right and then come back and with very little lost time. Anything else for Alex before her toddler can go to bed?
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much for coming and spending
Yes.
and
Thank you all. Yeah, I really selfishly hope that we get to work together because I miss Maine every day. And any opportunity to connect with people in Maine is good by me. So thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope it is.
So yeah, keeping an eye on the time, we were thinking we would be done by 7, so maybe we
Start
should,
till 7:15.
yeah, that's true.
So it has just been an hour and
hour.
1 minute.
So maybe we should shift into, if you don't have other questions, kind of the pricing aspect, because that was certainly a concern that was raised by board members last time.
Yeah, I can walk you through it, or you can, and in a way, this is a linear, if you start at the top and go down, that's the process. Or you can just ask questions, what's best for you?
I have a question for Pat. Were you intending that we were going to try to use youth facilitators, or were we going to use Jennifer and her team to do so? I'm just curious.
Well, you know, initially my thought was that it would be ideal to use Jennifer and her team, because they would be third-party facilitators that had no connection to the community. I think that there's great value in that, in terms of people wanting to feel free to state their honest opinion versus sitting across from someone whom they might know. They might not feel as comfortable sharing everything. However, I know money is a concern, and as we look at the option here, that could be a $2,800 savings. If instead we were able to target key individuals within our community who could be trained to serve as facilitators. And if we are really careful in how we go about doing that, I think that is a reasonable option and alternative for us.
And two, in that line 6, I think it is, that assumes that youth are still doing that. So either way, even if we can facilitate all of them, or we can facilitate 3/4 of them and train youth to have the youth conversations.
That's
And
kind
so-
of what I was thinking,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
So-
Well, I think, yeah, facilitators that are good at what they do are worth the weight in gold. I sat through Andrea's
Agreed.
lunch and know how that can go. So no, I think that's a good approach. To me, that's worth its weight in gold for that, because you can hear those things and pull out the topics.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me like it's going to be basically a blueprint for what we're looking for. I guess my other question was how we're going to select the participants. I know sometimes our communities, people have passion, but maybe this isn't the way they want to do it, or, you know, how we thought about how would we select who would do it.
So we've thought about it already in twofold, or two steps. One, the administrative team met last week before, and I've asked the building administrators, department heads to send me a list of names of parents, community members, students, staff members, and I wanted a diverse group. I don't necessarily want, you know, everyone who thinks the same. Send that list to me so that we can start generating a list of people that we can invite. Then I think the second part is that we'll have to put out some sort of invitation to anyone in the community who wishes to participate, to give them that opportunity to submit their name and their contact so that we can have them involved. And what we talked about is having 40 conversations. So that would be 6 people, right? Be 6 people per conversation. And there were 10
of each.
So it would be
Yep.
youth, educators, parents, and community members. And we don't know at this point whether we'll actually get 60 individuals who will step forward that represent each of those 4 groups. And if we don't, of course, that will decrease the cost. But
Great, thank you,
We have
Pat.
some ways that we have been successful and ways that we have been unsuccessful in recruiting people in the past, and we would obviously work with you all to kind of try to do that in the best way.
Great.
Whether it's using social media also.
right.
Because we had talked about too, you don't want only the people who you know have concerns because they come to your office frequently. We really want to bring in not just those people, but also the people who may not feel comfortable doing that.
And we don't only want to hear from the people who are in support of the schools.
Yeah. It's especially challenging with youth, I have to say, and having a team as a part of, and maybe it's Sophia as a member of the school board, but to have someone really working on that part, the youth recruitment is critical. If it just comes from the teachers, it's harder.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that sort of position of let the youth kind of do their thing, and then it feels validating for them and empowering too. Yeah.
Right, and we also talked about the timing, right?
Yeah, right.
And so for youth, it would be carving out some time maybe during the school day.
Yeah.
We know how busy they are before school, after school, and to think that they're going to stay after school in order to participate probably isn't realistic.
Yeah.
Also have some community conversations during the day for parents, community members who are available during the day, but then also hold some at night for those who work during the day. So we try to be really flexible in finding times that would work for individuals and all of the stakeholder groups.
And a cross-section of students as well, not just
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
an absolute cross-section.
Absolutely.
Which may mean being creative on when we have and where we have the conversations. And so
Right.
just to make it clear, these are generally held on Zoom, but we definitely have done them off of Zoom as well. And in particular, for students who may be in special education programs, maybe they do not feel like the teachers at text do not think this is the way for us to have that right conversation, then we have it in person. So.
And record it anyway.
Oh, yeah, we just either use a phone recorder or we actually have a hand. Zoom also makes hand recorders. Did we know this? I don't know. They do that, or sometimes we'll just turn on Zoom and just be like that. Yeah, whatever works for the people to be involved.
Other questions?
Sorry, just to clarify on the sort of the money side, if we can get local facilitators or people to attend the district could get a cost savings that way. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so there's a participation piece.
Yeah, so under that third section, right, that third block where it's 3,300, we could potentially reduce that to about 2,800, right? Because they would still have to be trained. And so there is a fee for the training. And then the other potential savings right off the top is closer to the bottom, where we have the transcription, artificial intelligence analysis. That's based on 40 conversations. If we have fewer conversations, there's a bit of a savings there. The other thing that you can consider is 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth block down, where Jennifer talked about this. And we, after all of the data, after all of the conversations occurred, the data was compiled, we have the opportunity to have that public stakeholder participant sense-making session that she mentioned. That's not required. You know, if you decide that it's not necessary for the participants to be able to go back in and do that work, instead it's done at a different level, then that's a savings as well. So it really depends on how many times, I guess, and to the degree of participation that you want to involve the stakeholders.
Yeah, and just to clarify that too, the line above, the introductory video, we can make one of those just for you all so that people can still go in and highlight and do that annotating on their own at home. That could still happen. That would just be the smaller fee, but the larger fee is let's get everybody in a room and we'll do it by Zoom too. And people will say, now this is how you log in, and now let's look at it together and let's start to create together this code book. That's just a much more in-depth process than allowing people to kind of go in and do some highlighting. But
so all of those are decisions that can be made by the board.
And as we go along, just to make that part clear too.
Right, so it doesn't have to be today. We don't have to decide today what you're going to do. And I said at the board meeting that it was gonna be about $20,000. And Jennifer reminded me that that was going to be no more than. So she went back and she really dug in and provided you this detailed list. And so it comes up to 16,643. If you take out 2,800 in terms of facilitators, if we can get 5, 6 maybe facilitators locally who are willing to volunteer their time, now we're already down to 13,000. So that makes it a little bit more manageable. I indicated to you that I have an idea. I was already told where I could apply for some money. And so I have the letter written to request. There may be a couple thousand there. There may be more money in the spring, but this is the 2,000 is what I think I can get right now. Angela is pursuing a couple ideas, a couple options, no guarantees. And also Jennifer has requested that I officially write her a letter once the board makes an official decision. And there may be some other organizations that she has access to who may be able to provide some funding. So it's not necessarily all coming out of the budget, not that we have the money for all of that. So I just want to clarify, there may be other sources that we can really look to. Again, if we're the first school district in the state, you know, there may be organizations that are interested in investing in this. And that this process that we use can be used as a model for other organizations down the road.
That's actually one of the reasons why the Qualitative fee is so low. So when we first spoke, I said, back of the napkin, you know, I can do it for under $20,000, you know, and then really got into it to make sure that you know, Ed Forum's a nonprofit too, and we're not out to make a huge profit. We just need to be able to exist, but really trying to make it possible for you all to do it. And also, Qualitative definitely wants to be involved in this project. As you said, Alex just has a personal investment in Maine, but also, right, like if we can develop something here, then maybe other schools can take advantage of, other districts can take advantage of it too. So Qualitative definitely, this is the bare bones cost. This is at cost. Let's put it that way. That's the at cost. It's not their expertise cost, which they're donating.
Which is kind and really wonderful. And if it helps to position us moving into the future, I think it's money well spent.
So what do you guys think?
2 thumbs up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate the
Can we do thumbs?
presentation.
Yeah.
It filled in the gaps
You
for me.
can do thumbs. What do you think, Diane?
I really, in my course of my long life, I've been involved in a couple of educational things like this. Not like this, if they fit whatever decade they happened in, that I didn't think that there was a lot of value. And so I try to get in my mind, okay, what, I realize this could come out altogether differently than what I think, and it probably should. But I just want us really to articulate, even though we change it as we maybe go along, what do we want? What would we like to see? Like, oh, we didn't realize that the public and our students and parents were concerned about such and such so much, and how could we work on that? That sounds like what we're looking for. That's a good thing to know. And then there's a lot of work after that, once you figure it out.
Right.
And I just want to get more of my mind clearer about those things. Tell me if you understand what I'm saying, you know. I just don't want to jump off something and say, this sounds great. I'm not as worried. Money I'm concerned about, but not that much. If it really is getting us somewhere. I I was on the board a long time ago and then I was off for a long time and now I'm back. So I wasn't present for when you did strategic planning and then you said COVID got in the way. So I just, no.
No, really, what happened is we did the strategic planning and it was great. It was a wonderful process. People were pretty engaged. We developed an educational plan and we used that plan to drive our annual goals. And we used it for a number of years. But as the years passed and we addressed some of the issues identified in the goals, then we checked them off, right? And so you get so far, so many years down the road and there's nothing else to check off.
Oh, so you feel you accomplished more.
We accomplished a lot, but
Absolutely.
then we also had the TIF grant. Remember the TIF grant?
Oh, yes.
So the TIF grant consumed a lot of our time and that was centered around teacher evaluation. It was a federal grant on model teacher leadership evaluations, and it was a 5-year commitment. That took so much of our time that the rest of the ed plan kind of took the back burner. And then once that was done, we had some other state initiatives that we really had to focus on because we've been spending 5 years on our TIF grant. And then again, it's older now, right? It's already 8, 9, 10 years old, and then COVID hit. So it really is time to once again, and we were talking about it prior to, Becky and I at least were talking about it prior to COVID, saying it's time. We need to do our strategic planning again. We need to take a look at that. It's time to revisit it and to give us some direction, because right now it's just your administrative team. Now, you can trust us. I know I'm confident in the goals that we are setting for the district, but it's just us. And I really think it's important for the board to be involved in that and for the community to be involved and for us to really hear the voices of our community. So that's why I'm so supportive. And as I said before, asking community members, staff members, administrators to give up a day and a half, 2 days on a weekend to sit in a room, coming up with a strategic plan, just is not ideal. People are so busy. It's difficult to give up that amount of time, make that type of commitment. And so, yeah, you might get 80 people in the room, but to actually have maybe upwards of 240 voices, more students than we ever would have involved, more staff than we would ever have involved. And to be able to do that in a 75, 90-minute period, I really think that that's exciting. And it can just help us glean and get more information and feedback and input that we ever would in a more traditional strategic planning process.
And the format being so different, it's not on paper anymore.
Yeah.
It's not, and that's to be able to listen to it and to reflect on it over and over again, as many times as we need to until it's time to do it again. And I would add also, when we were doing the TIF grant, that gave us money. That gave us money while it was a pain. And a difficult and thorough thing to do, but it gave us grant money to do things that we needed to do within the district as well, and to be able to pay some of our staff to do training and putting a good face on it. It was not a complete and total waste of energy and time.
We are still using it every single day. It's still a part of our evaluation process.
Right.
And the evaluations are mandated by law now. And so we had that work done. So we were actually ahead of many other school districts as a result. And I know it was difficult. I know there was a lot of stress for administrators and for teachers, but I actually feel like our evaluation system, or with the training that we engaged in with our administrators, that there is greater value to the evaluation process, to the quality of the evaluations that staff receive, that there's substance there, which is what it's about. It's not about just checking off a box and someone going, oh yeah, great job. It's great job because XYZ, we saw this, and there's real evidence tied.
Correct.
And we're still doing that work. At our administrative team meeting, we just spent some time going through and trying to do some calibration of feedback to make sure that teachers are getting the same type of feedback, whether they're at Helen Thompson, whether they're at Pittston Randolph, whether they're at the high school. So I do not feel like it was a waste of time, but it was definitely burdensome.
It was very burdensome.
It was, and I, from other districts, not just ours, and I don't want to get off the track here too much, but I heard from friends, it's anecdotal, you know, that some teachers didn't understand why they had this extra work so much. Now, you'll probably see it altogether differently. And maybe I don't know about among the administrators, but among the teachers, maybe they need to know more about these things that you hold now that you didn't have because of it.
Yeah, because we have new teachers, and you're right, I don't know how things are communicated directly in every building. We had conversations at the district level, but it may be time, but yeah, that is kind of maybe off topic of what we're here today, but
I just want to, I guess I want to see some ending. I know it's not all concrete and it could take us in directions we have no idea of. I just hope it's fruitful.
Are you trying to imagine what happens after we do all this listening? And so?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did create a sample table of contents, so you could understand one way that we could provide a report to you all, and Pat can share that with you. The screen sharing is off, so I won't share that with you.
You could actually share it.
Okay. I mean, do you want to see that, or should I just send it to you and you can share it?
You can, if you have time, you can certainly do that. I mean, I really do think we need to move forward tonight with the plan.
There's this. Let's see if this is it. Okay, so this is just one, maybe I can turn on my brightness. Doesn't look that much. This is just one way that we can look at it, and it's a sample, so it's not the product. We can say, here are the key topics on the minds of students, 1, 2, 3, and each one of those has subtopics and quotes from each of those. So links where you can say, oh, so you think that's what they're talking about. Why do you think that? Click on that and listen to it yourself so that you can interpret it also. On the minds of educators, minds of parents, minds of community, these are the key things that are coming up. But then the next section is all about by question, because you can see that there are commonalities in each of those conversation guides, the list of questions. So then we go through and say, you know, at that beginning part about values, where are the similarities and values across all 3 of those groups? And then we go each question, and then we give you again the same thing about, are there any subtopics, and then quotes, direct links to listen to the voices giving the evidence of those examples. And then some major areas of community agreement. Where are the major themes that really we heard across all of these conversations? And now we can pull those out on our own and then bring them, so without going through sense-making sessions with the educators, with the youth, with the greater community. We can just do that with you all, and that's built into that fee schedule. Is we do a first pass, and then we come in and meet with you and share that first pass and say, but how do we want to really end up with the nuggets here? So those are, we illustrate these under major areas of community agreement. And then there are topics for further discussion. Like, people had a lot to say about that, but there's no way to wrap it up. That needs more. And that's either then you all take that further, maybe you don't take it further, you have enough on your plate, maybe you ask us to take it further, maybe you assign some youth to take it further. But those are just, you kind of want to know what's still lingering. You know, those are things that are still lingering. And then next steps and recommendations, those are based on what we heard. These are the things these are some steps we suggest that you could take given that. Now, that might include things like, you have a lot of lingering topics out here that maybe need some further diving into. It might really have something to do with, and I was going to say this earlier about teachers. we all know there is a workforce crisis right now with teachers. That's just everywhere. That's not Gardner. And one of the reasons for that is, and I've been a teacher, I've done research on this topic too, teachers want to be seen and heard. They don't just want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want something to come from what they say. And so recommendations could be very specific. Like, we heard these things from teachers that rose so high to the top, they cannot go unaddressed. We suggest you put this as a key topic in your strategic plan. But it could also be as small as, we noticed a couple of comments from people here and there, but we know that these are important. Not that many people mentioned it, but you need to know that this thread ties together, and you probably want to address this somewhere in your plan. And then, a conclusion that the appendix is, we actually have, just because of our lucky association with Cortico at MIT, they have very powerful data visualization tools. So we can have graphs and charts and things like that, that for people who enjoy looking at things more quantitatively, there's a lot of that we can offer too. But this is one way of looking at it. And certainly in that beginning time, that whole first time when we would be meeting and discussing how to go forward, we can do it a different way too. That's one way that we can provide the information to you. So at the end, just to be clear about that, we're not imagining that we are writing a strategic plan for you. We're more saying, here are things that really need to be addressed. Here are some minor topics, major topics, and working with you to get to the point where you feel like, okay, so now we have something that we can take forward and dig into as a district to develop a plan over a longer period of time.
And ultimately, it'll be the responsibility of the board to follow through and take that information and make decisions on how to proceed. So if nothing happens with the data, I mean, truthfully, then that falls on your shoulders, right?
Right. But it can inform our budgeting. It can inform our use of our staff within buildings. We've done the work with the DM group. It can just, all of the more information we have in spoken word that has inflection and that intelligence, that emotional intelligence, the more we have of that, the better we can be directed to do the work that needs to be done. And it's not just reading it on a paper and saying, well, it says use 10. But if you listen to it, it can say use 10 and here's why. And you can see 50 different people say it either the same way or just a little bit differently. And it really can inform the way that our direction, not just in the classroom, and not just as a district, but in our budgeting. And
I think it can be great in the budgeting. I know we struggle, like how much is the correct amount, right? To be asking taxpayers.
how much is
pay.
enough?
Yeah, at the same time, this year you guys really struggled. I mean, I heard feedback that you cut too much. That there were programs that were cut that the community just didn't want to see happen.
Right.
So
I voted no because you cut too much. I've heard that several times. And
I think it's an incredible tool that the board could use. So,
and it could mean that we use the requested amounts of money just plain better because we've heard and we see and we hear and we understand. I think it's just, it's so much, it's multi-dimensional. It's not two-dimensional, it's more like 4 or 5 dimensional. So,
Jennifer, thank you for this layout. I think it is helpful and it was linear, like you said, as a project manager by trade, I was very appreciative of that. And so it made a lot of sense. So I thank you for that.
So before we go, do we want to do a thumbs up? I would like us to be able to do a thumbs up because I want not to go through this all over again in the boardroom because we had this meeting for this purpose. So I'm going to send the link to the board members who are not in attendance. My expectation is, as I said, that they will watch it and come prepared to vote. So I am asking this group for a thumbs up or a thumbs down as we move forward. Your thumbs are up?
Yes,
They are.
okay. For you to finish your sentence.
And you too. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And Jennifer, thank you for this, what I think is just a really great opportunity for MSAD11.
No, it was Pat's ear and eye that saw it and went for it.
Now she is constantly looking out for us and helping us to perfect what it is we're trying to do, even though we'll never be perfect at it. We keep growing and doing better. And I just am really grateful for that, so.
I'm hoping that at the end of the process, that maybe Pat would like to do some sort of presentation to other superintendents and school.
You don't have to.
I would be happy to do that, yes. Mhm.
Thank you. Please thank Alex too. Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Alex and the toddler.
I'd like to know the magic of how to get a toddler to bed at 7:10. Anyone
Right.
knows that?
Or high
Right?
schooler.
Anybody.
For a high schooler, yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
I do know that she uses, I will bring you something at daycare tomorrow when you pick you up.
That's
We use it
Oh,
to, our
bribery.
kids use a timer.
Oh, really?
So, okay,
Wow.
you have 5 more minutes. And so with the timer, he can manage his own time, but once that goes off, you're going to bed, like 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Jeez.
It's crazy. Yeah.
That'd be nice.
And sleeps like
Yeah.
12 hours.
Takes it off.
Right?
Are we good?
Wow.
It's 12:46, 12:46. It feels like 12:46. It is 7:46.
Well, I actually have something to say. The very first part of our board meeting was video only, not audio. So until we took the 5-minute break, there was no audio. on.
Oh, it's a good thing we did that.
Introduction and. yeah.
It was introductions, it was the pledge of allegiance.
And the few updates.
Yeah.
a couple of
Could be.
updates.
So we got the important parts.
Good.
Thank you, Terry, for doing that.
I'll put in the email that the first few minutes are,
I divided the video. into two.
oh, thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Travel well back to Freeport in the pouring rain.
So I will hold off the letter until the